Dutch and English settlers in Brooklyn, researching colonial-era ancestors. Brooklyn, as we know it today, is an incredibly diverse borough, home to millions of people from all over the world. But long before the borough became a vibrant, multicultural community, it was settled by the Dutch and English during the colonial era. If you're tracing your family roots in Brooklyn, you may find that some of your ancestors were part of this early colonial history. Early settlement of Brooklyn. The Dutch influence. The history of Brooklyn starts with its Dutch settlers in the early 1600s. The Dutch West India Company, a trading company, established the colony of New Netherland, which spanned parts of modern-day New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Brooklyn was originally part of this larger colony. In 1636, the Dutch founded a settlement called Breukelen, which is how Brooklyn got its name. The early Dutch settlers were primarily farmers and traders who arrived in search of opportunities to grow crops, raise livestock, and build a new life in the New World. Many of these early settlers came from the Dutch provinces of Holland, Zeeland, and Utrecht. For those with Dutch ancestry, genealogical research can be particularly rewarding. Early Dutch settlers in Brooklyn, often referred to as New Netherland colonists, kept detailed records of their land grants, marriages, and property transactions. Some records from this era are still preserved, and it's worth looking into these as a way to track your Dutch ancestors. Key timeline of Dutch settlers in Brooklyn: 1624 to 1664. Dutch settlers in New Netherland, 1636. Establishment of the settlement of Breukelen, modern-day Brooklyn, 1664. English takeover of New Netherland, renaming it New York. Many Dutch settlers remained in the area under English rule. Research tips. Look into records such as the Dutch church records in New Amsterdam, modern-day Manhattan, which include baptismal, marriage, and burial information. Explore land patents and wills, which can provide clues about where your ancestors lived and their occupations. Dutch surnames are often a rich source of genealogical information. Some families retained traditional Dutch naming conventions for several generations, even after English rule was established. English settlers and the changing landscape. In 1664, the English seized control of New Netherland from the Dutch. Under English rule, the region was renamed New York, and its population began to change. The English settlers who followed in the wake of the Dutch were part of a broader wave of migration from England, particularly in the late 1600s and early 1700s. The English were drawn to Brooklyn by its fertile land, proximity to New York Harbor, and growing commercial potential. Early English families in Brooklyn were involved in farming, fishing, and trade. Many were established landowners or became influential figures in the region, with some even receiving royal grants for land. By the early 18th century, Brooklyn had developed a reputation as a rural haven just outside the bustling city of New York. English-speaking families, many of whom were descendants of Puritans, Quakers, or Anglicans, formed the majority of the population. If you're researching English ancestors in Brooklyn, keep in mind the broader historical context of this period. The rise of the British colonial empire, the Atlantic slave trade, and the American Revolution